So Muslims often tie themselves back spiritually to Ishmael, and they would also reference Muhammad as being a direct descendant of Ishmael. Now, whether or not this is true, it's debatable. But Muslims believe it nonetheless, and so I think that's really what we have to deal with, right? If a Muslim says that Muhammad is a direct descendant of Ishmael, you could spend your time arguing how he's not, or you could deal with the fact that they're tying themselves back to Ishmael and go from there. So they do believe that Ishmael and Abraham built the Kaaba. Eventually Muhammad comes, considered to be Ishmael's greatest descendant, and it is Muhammad who receives the revelation from the angel Gabriel for 23 years. He's there in a cave in the year 610. It's said that he would retreat to a cave to pray and fast and seek God. It's believed that Muhammad felt as though the Jews had revelation that was specifically for the Jews, which was the Torah. And it was the Christians that had revelation that was specifically for the Christians, which came from Jesus and providing the gospel or the Injil. And then Muhammad really was anticipating that God would send something for the Muslim world, the Arabs, and he would go to a cave and pray, and it became him. He was the one that would become the prophet to the Arab people. His initial interaction with the angel Gabriel was quite a violent one, which Christians oftentimes will point to as proof that this could not have been an angelic being, except for the fact that most all interactions with angels, scripturally speaking, are quite intimidating. Often the first thing that's said is, do not be afraid, because it's a fearful thing to encounter an angel. Now, I'm not saying that I believe that it truly was the angel Gabriel. I'm just saying that I don't think we need to make that the point to argue with Muslims. We need to actually hear what they believe about Muhammad and what they believe about the Quran. And so most Muslims will argue that Muhammad, while he was in the cave, encountered the angel Gabriel, and the angel Gabriel came and pressed on his chest and said, recite or read in the name of your Lord. And that was the first revelation. Read in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clot. And your Lord is the most generous. This was the first revelation given to Muhammad while he was in that cave. Now, according to the Islamic sources, the hadith and certain biographies, Muhammad's initial reaction was one of fear. He had no idea who this angel was, this spirit. He was terrified to his soul. Some people have argued that he believed that it was the chief of demons. Bottom line is, who do you think was in the cave that day with Muhammad? Could it have been a demonic presence? Could it have been the angel Gabriel? Could it have been Muhammad all on his own, coming up with this all on his own? These are some of the questions that we ponder as we work with the Muslim world. And the conclusion that I've come to is, it really doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what the Muslim across from you thinks. And if they're under the impression that the angel Gabriel received a revelation from God himself, brought on 2 tablets that are preserved in heaven, and was the intermediary that would bring that revelation and give it to Muhammad, then that's what I'm going to work with. I have no desire to convince a Muslim otherwise, because I'm not interested in talking about the authenticity or the textual criticism of the Quran when I'm sharing the gospel with a Muslim. I'm interested in finding out what they believe and figuring out how can I take what they believe and share the gospel in that setting. So let's just deal with the fact of what most Muslim scholars agree to, and that is that the Quran was given to Muhammad directly from God by dictation from the angel Gabriel. The Quran exists. Most scholars would agree that the Quran exists and is preserved on tablets in heaven, and that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad over a period of 23 years. There's really a question that often arises in the minds of people, right? Especially today in the 21st century, and that is the Quran a book of peace or a book of violence? And believe me, you can find people to argue both sides. I don't think that the Quran is either. You can certainly produce a violent individual through Quranic passages and justify violence through the Quran, or you could produce a very peaceful, loving person through the peaceful passages of the Quran. And what's interesting is that there's sort of the best way to explain it is almost as though there's an Old and New Testament of the Quran. It's not in chronological order. The Quran, with the exception of the first chapter, is based on longest to shortest surahs. And the breakdown between when I say it as Old and New Testament is the revelations that Muhammad received while he was in Mecca are actually very much in line with much of the Old Testament. Quite peaceful and caring for widows, caring for orphans, not burying baby girls in the sand, kind of a social reform and a turning to the worship of one God in the midst of pagan idolatry. But eventually when Muhammad goes from Mecca and he's driven out of Mecca and flees on the Hijrah in 622 to Medina, that's when the revelations kind of shift and they become much more politically motivated, and there's a lot more violence that is there as well. And the shift also goes from obedience to God to obedience to the messenger of God, and so he becomes a political leader, and the Quran serves that political action as well. And so you have to take the Quran in context. We wouldn't like it if a Muslim came to us and said that, Christianity is really quite a violent religion when you think about it. I mean, Jesus didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, and then left it at that. We would be pretty frustrated because we would say, you're misinterpreting that verse and you're not taking the context of all of Scripture. Or if they pointed to Deuteronomy 13 and said, your own Scripture says if anybody entices you secretly to follow other gods, it should be your hand to put them to death. What do we do with that passage? Well, we interpret that passage in the context of all of Scripture. Well, Muslims do the same thing. The complexity that is involved in the development of hermeneutics for Islam is just as complex as it is for us in Christianity. So we need to be careful in pulling just one verse out and saying that Islam is a religion of violence, or doing just the opposite, pulling one verse out and saying Islam is a religion of peace. The reality is the Quran is a complex book revealed to Muhammad over the period of 23 years. It's collected and put together. There's no chronological order. Unless you're a Quranic scholar, you wouldn't be able to determine which verses were revealed in Medina, which verses were revealed in Mecca, because that Old and New Testament kind of breakdown isn't clear in the Quran. It's all together. And so it's difficult to read in that sense. The best way to read the Quran would be chronologically alongside of the Hadith, which kind of give interpretation to the Quran because it gives a little bit more information about what was going on in the context. And then you also have to take into consideration the tafsir, or the commentaries, which are the interpretations of the Quran. And so think about Islam as having a variety of sources, the same way that we have a variety of sources. They don't just wake up in the morning. Most Muslims are not waking up in the morning, having quiet times with their Quran and developing patterns for life. They're going to the Imam, asking the Imam, who is dealing with the scholarship of the Quran. The personal interpretation is really non-existent for most Muslims. And so we need to get out of our head of looking at the Quran in the context of which we view the Bible. It's a different book, but we do need to give the same charity to Muslims that we would want given to us when they say things, or when other people say things about the Bible. So I'll close with this. When you think about the Quran, think of it in this sense. The Quran is God's revealed word directly from God, right? I mean, this is the most they can know about God for a Muslim is what's revealed in the Quran, and then what's interpreted into what's called the Sharia, which we'll talk about later. For Christians, we have the Word becoming flesh, right? We have Jesus. And so we need to be careful that we don't draw the comparison between Muhammad and Jesus. It's not a good comparison. A better comparison, and one I don't even like to draw, is really the Quran and Jesus. It is God becoming Word in the Quran and God becoming flesh in Jesus. And so I encourage you to be careful with the things you see on the internet regarding the Quran, and be careful telling Muslims what they believe or what the Quran says. Really talk about what you know, and that might be the Bible and Jesus, and be more interested in what a Muslim believes about the Quran than explaining to them what you know about the Quran.